This is Covering the Spread. Here are your hosts, Jim Saunders and Dr. Ed Feng.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com, as we are taking a look at the betting impact of NFL free agency with Kevin Cole of Pro Football Focus. My name is Jim Saunders. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Ed Feng of thepowerrank.com. And Ed, we talked 9 days ago. We talked about men's college basketball conference tournaments. A couple things have changed since then. It has been a wild week. How are you doing?
I mean, it feels like it's been a month since that conversation, right? And in terms of how our society has changed, like, I mean, that could have been those are the same types of changes that happen over years or decades. So it's completely surreal. Obviously very sad to not be sitting and watching basketball today.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it was an amazing week. One of us sent to each other a message about like, oh yeah, we'll probably still have the tournament. And I think this was
the order of events was you said on Wednesday? It was Wednesday, I think. So Wednesday, you sent me a message saying, or I said I had lined up Keith Goldner to do our NCAA tournament podcast and the timing and stuff. And I said, yeah, we'll do this. And you said, if we have a tournament. And I was like, haha. Yeah. Good joke. That'll happen.
Yep, that was it.
It was that night that Rudy Gobert tested positive, and it was literally 4 hours later, and I was like, oh, it's not going to happen. It was wild.
Yeah, no, but I think it was until the next morning that they actually said that they weren't going to do it. But yeah, the Rudy Gobert thing, like, just, you know, tripped everything, obviously. And then, you know, I mean, everything changed, and it's the right thing to do. You know, I probably didn't take this seriously enough 10 days ago. But when you understand that how this thing is growing, essentially it's growing exponentially. And you can go check out a great video by, he goes by 3 Blue 1 Brown. He does math videos on YouTube. But he did one on the data on the coronavirus, and it's very good. And then this is why you study math, right? To study things like to understand like what exponential growth means and how to stamp it out and how to prevent it. And so anyways, last week was very interesting for me because about that same time, like Wednesday, I felt like awful. Yeah, I felt really bad, and went into the doctor on Wednesday to figure out what I had because, you know, one of my sons has some asthma issues and I didn't want to exacerbate that in any way. So I go on Wednesday night and I was like, you know, I want to be tested to see if I have flu. So they came back negative. And then you have the conversations like, oh, well, should I be tested whether I have coronavirus? And they're like, no, you don't really meet the criteria. And I was like, I just got off a plane from Boston. There's a lot of cases in the state of Massachusetts. Like, and I wasn't
also,
really
you're interacting with so many people at Sloan. Like, that's a lot of people who could be carrying it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, I mean, I wasn't really pushy about it because I know there's a lack of tests, which is a whole other story that we probably don't want to get into. But the testing capacity, in case you haven't heard, is not adequate in the United States of America.
Not where it should be.
So anyways, like, no, we're not going to do that. So then the next morning I get a call. It's like, well, the protocol changed. So now you're eligible to get the test. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's good. I want to know. So I drive back to the clinic and they say, you know, you don't need to come in. We'll come out to you in the car. It's like, okay, you know, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I understand that you don't want me to come in. I understand the hysteria about all this stuff. So I kind of drive around to the back and I see the physician's assistant that I had talked with the day before. And she's like, hold on. And so I have to wait a couple minutes while she puts on one of those hazmat suits. Oh, wow. She stepped into this white hazmat suit, zipped the thing all the way up, and has like the full face mask.
Yeah.
She's like, oh yeah, we got to do this in the car. So she comes into my car and, you know, we're just chatting about stuff. And then, you know, they do like a throat swab and then 2 nose swabs. And the flu nose swab is kind of like a device that looks like cotton candy. The corona ones are like more like spears. They don't feel quite as good. So anyways, I got that testing Thursday. And yeah, make a long story, they do one test, and then if that comes out negative, then they do the coronavirus test, of which they still need to call the CDC in order to get that approved, because that's basically where we're at in this country. So on Saturday morning, I finally found out that I tested negative for Corona. So great. And that was a really interesting social phenomenon too, because I was by far the least relieved person that I didn't have it. And my thinking is like, look, if I have it, I'm not too worried about it. I mean, the probability that I die is very small as a healthy adult. But you know, the widespread relief amongst everyone I know was kind of interesting as well. And it just kind of shows you, you know, just the fear about this. Like, I mean, my concern is about everyone else in society, right? And, you know, pray to God that we can have a football season this fall,
right?
When all this stuff passes. But yeah, so that was interesting. Unfortunately, the story does not end there, because on Monday I found out that someone that I had been hanging out with in Boston had tested positive.
Oh.
And so now we're in this spot where, like, you know, and there's some data out there that suggests that, like, these tests aren't particularly accurate if it's negative. So you know, I didn't go get retested or anything, but that's kind of what the testing situation is. Like, even if you tested negative, it's in no way guarantees that you don't have it.
That's wild. How?
It is wild.
I understand that tests can be incorrect. So like, this is not necessarily like entirely uncommon, but like, that means that people could test negative and have like this false sense of security and be, you know, not self-quarantining. That's brutal.
Well, I mean, hopefully everyone's being smart enough and just,
you hope,
only going out for exercise and to get food.
Right.
And like crucial supplies. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing in our home.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of in this weird spot. You know, in our situation, I just feel like, you know, if you're out there, like, and you're not sick, that certainly doesn't mean that you don't have this, right?
Right. I mean, and Kevin Durant and Idris Elba both were asymptomatic, and they both had it. Like, I mean, like, the fact that they were able to get tested, whereas others haven't, is a different subject. But like, you know, you might have it and just not know it, so you should be quarantining regardless of how you feel.
Exactly. Like, you should assume you have it and not try to give it to other people. You should assume everyone else has it and try not to get it again from them. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of what we need to do to hopefully beat this as a society. And anyways, that's my story with the testing. It's kind of just a mess.
I'm glad that they did it in your car, because like, you don't want to spread germs elsewhere, but like, also like the visual of that in my mind is wild, and I can't imagine like actually going through that, having someone in your car in a hazmat suit to test you.
Yeah, she was nice, so I mean, it wasn't like
that's good.
You know, like, but you know, it wasn't like having some creepy old dude or whatnot. But,
right, sure. I mean, that's absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad
and just
that
you mentioned, like, I feel fine now. I feel like I'm like 99, almost 100% now.
Sure.
And you know, I would say like, it feels a little bit different than a cold. Like, it usually takes me about a week to get over a cold. It's been about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
But yet it feels kind of different in the same way as well. So it's tough to say. And it's like, you know, even with modern science, like, I don't know. I have no idea what's in my body.
Yeah. It's nuts. It's nuts where we're at, and it's nuts the testing numbers as low as they are and all that stuff, you know, tests per capita and all that.
Yeah.
It's weird that we're in this position. I wish we weren't in this position. I wish we avoided being in this position, but you know, I think that hopefully people will do the best with it that they can. And in order to help you from quarantining, we'll have a little discussion about, we mean to do a book corner with Ed at some point. Maybe we'll get some suggestions on things you can do for your self-isolation during covering the future later on. So we'll circle back to that then. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. Before then, though, let's get to Kevin Cole. You can find his work at Pro Football Focus. You can find Kevin on Twitter at Kevin Cole PFF. We're going to discuss the betting fallout of free agency thus far. We're going to go through Tom Brady to the Buccaneers, what the Patriots' outlook is with no Tom Brady there as well, and get all of his thoughts on who has improved or potentially worsen through free agency as well. But first, today's podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Racing. FanDuel is doing its part to continue to bring sports fans excitement by offering users the chance to bet on horse racing. Use your existing FanDuel DFS login credentials to gain access to tutorials and to learn more about the sport, including understanding how the odds work, the various types of bets, and most importantly, how to win your bets. Watch all the races live across over 300 tracks and fill the void left in your sports fandom today. For more details, visit racing.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. We'll talk more horse racing next week with John Sheeran of FanDuel Sportsbook to get his thoughts on that and get a little intro to sports betting, because I don't know anything, so maybe John can teach us how to do that. But first, let's get to Kevin Cole of Pro Football Focus to get his thoughts on the winners and losers of free agency thus far.
Covering the present.
Let's bring Kevin Cole into covering the spread. Kevin, we appreciate you taking time from your bunker as you have barricaded yourself. How you doing so far today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, so I'm normally in New York City, as most people probably know. Not so great there, what's going on, but throughout the country, I'm sure everyone's dealing with this. So I'm practicing extreme social distancing right now, extreme.
But I think that it's also like smart because we all get cabin fever, and you were kind of proactive in that, getting away from one of the hot spots of coronavirus, and also like not driving yourself mad by being in an apartment. So like, I think it's a lot of foresight on your part to, find an Airbnb and relocate there for a bit. That's smart. I like it.
Yeah, hopefully there aren't. Hopefully it's like a waste, right? Being that things actually end up being good, but it's one of those things they talk about, like what do you want to talk about? Black swan, tail risk, all those sorts of things. You think to yourself, do I really want to do this or not? But then again, this could be, the biggest event in a lot of our lifetime. So why not take a little extra caution there?
Yeah, the hope, I think, is that we overreact. Like, if we overreact, that's a great thing. Like, if that's the worst thing that comes from this, awesome.
Right. I'm not going to be doing, like, fist pumps if everything goes down the drain and I'm not there.
Right.
So, so that's how I look at it.
Absolutely. So let's dive into some football here, Kevin, and because there's been a lot of stuff going on. You've been doing some great work over at Pro Football Focus. A lot of the work you've been doing has been centered around a wins above replacement metric. We know about wins above replacement from baseball, but we haven't really seen a lot of this on the football side. So what led to the development of this WAR metric, and what are some of the biggest factors that go into calculating the actual numbers behind it?
Sure. Yeah. I have to give some credit to a couple of fellows in our research and development department, Eric Eager and George Jahuri, before me, who developed this metric. And first, we have data at PFF that a lot of people don't. So I think they were brought in and they were able to use it. And one of the issues is there are some other value metrics like approximate value that they do at Pro Football Reference, but ours, we have grades on every single play for every single player, which is something you really need to try to build out that value. So essentially what it's doing is it's a grade-based metric. So it's translating these grades into what we would expect when you're simulating with and without these players and you're plugging in a replacement level player instead. And then from there, it's figuring out on average when those sorts of situations happen, how big of a difference are we looking at points and wins and things like that. And then we're able to get a number for every single player in the NFL by simulating the team's results with and without them. And that's kind of, like you said, the basis of what I'm looking at here when I'm looking at new players being added to teams in free agency.
And how much does that take into account positional value? Like, what role does that play in calculating out these numbers?
It's a lot. So we have an amplifier essentially for each facet of the game. So it's not really like positional value is derived because of the activities that you're doing. So it's like so a quarterback could pass or they could run. So those are two different things. Those are going to have different weights with them. A running back who can either be a receiver or it can be a runner or it can be a pass blocker. So each of these have different weightings to them. And what we find is, at least by our metric, passing is much more important than what people may think, even though people are kind of hip to that at this point. Receiving is much more important. So you'll see someone like Austin Eckler being a very valuable back versus someone like Derrick Henry, which people may not suspect that to be the case. And then on the defense side of the ball, what we've been, the big discovery, if you want to call it that we've had is that coverage is a lot more valuable than we see versus pass rush. But at the same point in time, it's very it's not as stable as pass rush. Like a good pass rusher, you kind of know they're going to continue to be a good pass rusher. We don't know that as much in coverage, but if you have great coverage, like you see someone like the Baltimore Ravens or the Patriots have been able to do, you can build a much better defense and get better results by that.
Excellent. So you've been using this WAR to track changes in teams in the offseason. What teams have stood out? Obviously, some that we'll talk about later, but what teams have stood out either in the positive or negative sense?
Well, we're wrapping everything into this. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a snapshot of the end of season roster and then projecting 2020 based upon that, and then comparing that now to as all these different changes have happened since then, and then projecting that out and looking at the differences. So trades are going into it. It's not just free agent signings. If someone's cut, sometimes rosters can improve if someone's cut on different teams. So all that's wrapping into it. So the number one team right now by a hair is the Arizona Cardinals, and we all know about the DeAndre Hopkins trade. And for this exercise, I'm not really penalizing teams for giving up draft picks or rewarding teams that much for receiving draft picks, because rookies are normally not that valuable year one, and I'm only looking at 2020. So the Cardinals are number one, and the second is the Indianapolis Colts, mainly on the addition of Phillip Rivers. But as you know, they've made a bunch of other moves, like getting DeForest Buckner, which is another big move.
What about the flip side? Are there any teams that have had extremely negative impacts so far in free agency?
Yeah, I mean, we go back to DeAndre Hopkins. The Texans have been one of the worst teams, largely based upon that. But then in other moves, they're really not moving the needle too much. I mean, the Patriots, because as of now, I'm assuming that it's either going to be Cody Kessler or Stidham who are going to come in. I mean, likely they're going to bring someone else in, but just for now, I'm not making any assumptions. So the loss of Tom Brady is pretty huge there. And there are some others that are near the end of the list. And I think this is something where I wouldn't necessarily say like the teams at the top are going to be great and the teams at the bottom are not going to do well. It's one of those things where you're kind of penalized by your success. You're going to lose free agents if you've done well over time, and you're going to be very active in free agency if you have a lot of cap space because you're not re-signing your own stars, meaning you haven't drafted well or you haven't picked up guys on the cheap in the past. So the winners and losers, like they say that the Browns are near the top and they win every single offseason, right? So it doesn't necessarily translate into results. It's more of how much you're improving yourself based upon a lower baseline for teams like the Browns.
So it's important to keep the baseline in mind for sure there, which is a good note as well.
Yes.
So let's talk about Tom Brady. You talked about the Patriots potentially getting worse there depending on what they do outside of him. But let's talk about the Bucs side first, because Brady going to the Bucs generated a lot of hype around this team. What does Brady joining this team do for their outlook? And we've seen a lot of hype around them from a betting perspective. They are 18-1 now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Is that hype justified with this move?
I mean, he's a definite improvement. I mean, the Bucs are near the top of our improvement index. I think the question with them is a couple of different things. Winston, for all of his flaws, he had a lot of positives also. So I think people may view him as being a very negative player, but net of the negatives, he still had a lot of positives. So I think that the upgrade to Brady is something that at least I'm projecting will be more like in a 1-win sort of category. I've seen some projections out there recently talking about 3.5 wins, and I just don't see how that could be humanly possible, honestly. I'm sure
I saw that number, and I was kind of curious if it was like with Ryan Griffin as a projected quarterback, because it got my attention, I would say that. Yeah,
I mean, well, here's not to get too nerdy here, but a quick way to think about these wins and translate them into something that your audience would understand is a win is roughly about 32-ish points in point differential. So each win you're talking about here, if you moved up a win, that would be like moving up like 2 points in the point spread, let's say. So I'm saying it's about a 2-point difference, let's say, between someone like Tom Brady and Winston. Whereas if you're saying 3.5, it's like a 7-point difference, which seems a little bit high to me. So anyway, they're going to improve upon this. But the other thing you have to look at with them is they had a much improved defense last year. And whether or not that will continue, defense is a little bit less stable than offense. So they were very poor defense, which then Todd Bowles came in. They did really well. Will that continue or not, I think, is also a question mark that people may be assuming. Tom Brady, great defense, but that great defense part, we'll see if that actually happens.
Yeah, again, like that regression for some of the coverage statistics could hit them pretty well. Let's talk about the Patriots. Obviously lost Tom Brady at quarterback. 20, they've dropped to to win the Super Bowl. What do you think about that number and the team in general and how they're going to move on?
I mean, I think that's an intriguing number. I would say, if I was going to want to look at something, I'd be much more willing to bet that than to bet the Buccaneers on the other side of the equation. And it really depends on how they're going to fill that quarterback hole, as you said. But this is a unique year where there are options out there. I mean, Nick Foles is off of the table now. Andy Dalton is going to be available, I assume, at some point. And he's another guy where you wouldn't think that he's a great option, but he used to be our measure of a mediocre average quarterback, and an average quarterback is worth a lot more than a backup or a replacement level quarterback. So I feel like a guy like him, I don't know if Cam Newton, the health issues, we'll see what ends up happening there, or if they end up trading for someone else who may become available if a team drafts someone like Justin Herbert and then a Derek Carr or someone like that becomes available. I think there are options out there, and I think the rest of the team is built in a way where they should be looking to compete this year. I mean, talk of them, tanking and getting Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it just seems like total nonsense to me, other than the fact that we have to attach every single great player to the Patriots in some sort of way. So I think they're ready to compete, and that division still doesn't have a lot of great talent in there. I mean, everyone's looking at Buffalo, but I think Josh Allen is a huge question mark, and they could bring in someone better than Josh Allen if they bring in someone like an Andy Dalton, I feel like, just for next year.
Yeah, the Trevor Lawrence thing seems to be just Patriots
absolutely.
Paranoia at this point. Yeah. Like every time we're like, oh my gosh, they're going to get Trevor Lawrence and we're going to go through this all again. Not looking forward to that. But it seems like the Josh Allen thing has a lot of parallels to Mitchell Trubisky the year before, where the PFF grades were super low. Maybe people getting a little bit too excited. So I think that potentially being inclined to buy the Patriots does make a lot of sense. Let's go back to another team you discussed before with the Arizona Cardinals, because they're heading into year 2 with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. They showed some flashes last year, but, definitely an interesting team. And now they've got DeAndre Hopkins in the fold. How big of an addition is someone as good as DeAndre Hopkins to that offense? And we can actually quantify that now because of this WAR metric at PFF.
I mean, it's a big addition. We see wide receiver at the top end as being the second most valuable position to quarterback. So someone like DeAndre Hopkins in his best years is, over a win for us. I mean, the best quarterbacks could be something like 3 wins over replacement. I'm talking about here, not being added to a team of above replacement level players. So it's a big deal. He's been one of the most valuable players in the NFL. I think he's been the second most valuable player to Michael Thomas over the last few years as far as non-quarterbacks. So it really is a big deal. As far as what they can do, I would be higher on them if they weren't in arguably the most the toughest division in all of football, and they have a lot of issues on the offensive line and on the defensive line, but I feel like, a second-year leap for Kyler could put them in a decent position to surprise some people this year.
Is that something you are inclined to believe in, is a leap from Kyler Murray based on what you saw from him as a rookie?
I think so. I mean, he did not have much to work with. If you look at the fact that they wanted to, at the beginning of the year, run these 4 wide sets, and they kind of had to get rid of them when they didn't really have the talent to do so. They're going to draft, I think it's 11th or 13th or something like that. So they're going to draft right in that range where they're going to have to decide, are they going to go for another wide receiver at that point? Are they going to go for defense? We'll end up seeing what's happening. But they just have a lot of holes to fill. But he has the mobility that people are looking for. He has the accuracy. He has the arm talent. He was definitely our number 1 guy well before he moved up boards last year. So I think he could really surprise some people this year, despite the fact that people are pretty high on him going into this season.
Excellent. Yeah, let's talk about the Colts. So this is another team that we thought of as a Super Bowl contender before Andrew Luck retired. They're bringing in Phillip Rivers on a 1-year deal, traded for DeForest Buckner. What is your what do you see about their Super Bowl odds? Actually, 24-1 at FanDuel right now.
I mean, I think those are pretty interesting. I would put that as one of the ones I'd be most interested in. I mean, if you think about Phillip Rivers, he's not getting nearly the sort of hype of Tom Brady, yet he was off last year, but it was only 2 years ago that he was probably in the top 5 as far as quarterbacks are concerned. He was really playing at a level that was, not MVP level, especially not versus someone like Patrick Mahomes that year, but it's kind of adjacent to that sort of level. He's had down years in the past. I think it was 2012 or 13 where he had a very off year, and then he was able to come back for that. So I think he raises the ceiling quite a bit from them. And what you've seen as far as their strategy has been concerned the last few years, they've been doing everything that we want smart teams to do, which is, accumulate draft picks, trade back, get a lot of young, cheap talent, have a lot of cap space. I mean, they have more cap space than anyone. And now they're starting to deploy that. And it looks like Ballard is starting to push some of those chips in. And I feel like that really raises the ceiling for them in a division where you've had the Texans, who have been, the division champ multiple times there, and they're in a little bit of flux. We'll see what ends up happening with them. And the rest of the division does not look that strong. So I think they're a very interesting candidate to have a leap this year, especially because they're playing in this weaker division.
Now, you wrote a piece about quarterback aging and this aged class of guys we have, like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and Phillip Rivers was in there. And I thought that your analysis of Rivers was super interesting because you kind of were talking about what you were just saying, where his fall off wasn't necessarily as big as perception may have been, because we see the 20 picks and people just kind of, they're like, whatever, he's done, he's toast. Is that analysis what's making you be a little bit more bullish on this Colts team now that Rivers is in the fold, and Rivers in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of different things. What you mentioned, it was kind of dividing the positives and the negatives of what quarterbacks do. So we would think maybe intuitively if someone's throwing a lot of interceptions, that's when they're cooked and they're done. But it's really the opposite. It's when they're not making the positive plays in the same way that they used to be able to make. Avoiding negatives is something that quarterbacks can do if they really want to. You can always get rid of the ball quicker. You can always just throw more incompletions. You could always kind of do an Alex Smith or a Derek Carr sort of way of playing quarterback. Sorry, guys. Sorry to have to step on you guys there. But the upside is what you really are looking for in those quarterbacks. So I think that's part of it. And I also think that what we know about age curves, we probably know less than we think we do about age curves, because we see a fall off and then we see a guy go away. But the fact that they're old may just mean that they don't have an opportunity to show us that they can come back again like they do. And like I mentioned about Rivers, he had this, what would be, if he was, 7 years older at the time, back in 2012, we would have said, oh, that's an age curve. He's done. He's cooked. But then he came right back after having a very tough year with low-end type of plays, with interceptions that he struggled with last year. So he's come back from this before in the past. He was just younger then than he is now. So his ability to do it now, we probably are underestimating.
All right. Any other teams that have made moves so far this year that stand out to you from a betting perspective, whether it be in the positive or negative sense? They just put a win totals today at FanDuel Sportsbook, so probably not looking at those. But anything else stand out to you based on what we've seen so far this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, again, going to the Buffalo Bills, like I said, I'm not very high on Josh Allen, but I really like the way that they changed their offense last year to make it a little bit more of a short passing game, not rely on the deep passes that much. Stephon Diggs is a great addition, of course. They're bringing in core players on defense. Sean McDermott looks to be one of the better coaches in the NFL. And as much as I think that with decent quarterback play, the Patriots could be right back in the mix again, you're looking at that division, you're saying, well, what if that doesn't happen? What if it's just an unknown right now. So I think that there's probably some value in the fact that they can at least win that division, and then we'll end up seeing what's happening there. I'm kind of looking at some other ones. It's a little bit tougher to pick out here. I think the Chargers, another one, if you want to just bet on uncertainty, again, at the quarterback position. Can they bring in someone to do well? Because they've built out this defense in free agency, bringing in a lot of guys, and I feel like they have a pretty complete roster, and they've also improved the offensive line now with bringing in Brian Beluga and then also Trey Turner. They have all the pieces other than the quarterback. Are they really going to stick with Tyrod Taylor? I don't think so, but they're going to say that now until they know what they're going to do.
Yeah, definitely an interesting team because the offensive line was like this major issue for them, but getting Trey Turner and Brian Bulaga immediately it cleanses that quite a bit, and then they have that high-end pick to potentially get a left tackle as well to replace Russell Okung. So a lot of interesting pieces in place there for sure. That is Kevin Cole. Make sure you find all of his work over at Pro Football Focus and follow him on Twitter at Kevin Cole PFF to find all those charts we were talking about teams improving through free agency and trades. Kevin, we appreciate the time. Good luck with you. Good luck to you dealing with kids at home throughout all this craziness. Godspeed to you on that for sure. And we appreciate the time. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Ed. And everybody stay healthy.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Covering the future.
One big thank you once again to Kevin Cole for swinging by and talking about free agency. We're going to keep the free agency discussion flowing right here, Ed, with covering the future. You want to talk about the New England Patriots. I'm going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So more Tom Brady discussion. What are your thoughts on New England now with their kind of uncertain future right now?
Yeah, I think it's kind of time to throw up in your mouth a little bit and buy low on Bill Belichick. So clearly he lost his quarterback, and I don't think Brady is replaceable at that level. I personally thought he was pretty decent last year. I didn't think the problems with that offense they certainly weren't all on him. They did have some other issues on that side of the ball. But I think what you need to remember is that this was a historically good defense, and especially the secondary. And they're going to be bringing back Stephon Gilmore, Jonathan Jones, J.C. Jackson at the cornerback position. All of them graded out really well on Pro Football Focus last year. They've invested where the analytics say that it matters most, which is coverage. Kevin Cole talked a little bit about that, about how coverage is more important than pass rush. Coverage does tend to be volatile from season to season as well. So last year, New England was second in terms of pass defense. When I look at adjusted success rate, they were a hair behind San Francisco in that department. And that volatility means you don't necessarily expect them to be first or second next year, right? So you expect some regression in the mean. But it's not reasonable. It's not unreasonable to think that this is, again, going to be a top 5 unit in terms of pass defense. So I definitely see them set on that side of the ball. And on offense, we'll see. I see no world in which they start the season with Cody Kessler or Jarrett Stidham as their starting quarterback. I think Andy Dalton makes a ton of sense, as Kevin Cole mentioned before. Obviously, that they need to make that work with Cincinnati and things like that. But I think the thing that you want to remember is just the Belichick factor. You can check out a lot of things that he did in a book called Gridiron Genius by Michael Lombardi, who is an NFL executive that also coached with Belichick for 1 year. So there's a lot of interesting chapters in there about, just the effort that a Belichick coaching staff puts into special teams and things like that. I just wanted to point out one stat that I think is just kind of mind-blowing. You would think a stat like broken tackles would tend to be pretty random from year to year, not something that one defense could be particularly good at consistently. But I mentioned this on the show heading into the preseason, but Football Outsiders looks at broken tackle rate on defense. Obviously, the lower rate is better. And before this previous season, New England had been in the top 5 out of the past 6 years. And it's just, I think it's the kind of number that I think is probably indicative of coaching and the meticulous preparation that these guys put into the game. I think these guys I feel pretty good about them, at least on one side of the ball. And you put even an average quarterback like Andy Dalton on the other side, I don't think their Super Bowl odds are going to get lower than 20-1, which they are right now. AFC Championship odds are at 10-1. And I think those might be even more interesting because, clearly Kansas City's ahead of them. Clearly Baltimore is ahead of them. Or at least we expect, we would expect that they would be ahead of them. But I don't know about any other team in the AFC that I definitely would not put Buffalo ahead of them right now. No. Indy's an interesting team, obviously, depending on how the Rivers thing works out. So, if you are thinking about buying low on New England, I think now is the chance to do it because I don't think that price is going to get any better for you.
Yeah, win totals at FanDuel Sportsbook just went up literally this morning. Their total is 9.5 right now. It's plus 100 on the over, minus 116 on the under. So still a little bit in on there, but I think that the analysis of it's probably not going to get worse is accurate from a betting perspective. Like their numbers probably not going to get any better or not any any shorter, I should say, because I think that right now they're making it's not going to get any longer is the way I'd phrase that. Because right now there's a possibility Jarrett Stidham's a quarterback.
No, there's
the odds. No. So you cited Michael Lombardi. He said on his podcast, which I like Lombardi too. I think he's a very smart guy. I was reading that same book.
Right.
He was saying that they actually like Stidham and he thinks there's a chance they could go into the year with him. I don't know if I believe that, but he was also the guy who said the Bears are trying to trade for Nick Foles. So he's still connected. He's a sharp guy, especially connected in New England. So
you kind of think about it. You think of just about the small sample size of quarterbacks, right? Like Stidham was supposed to be this stud, transferring from Baylor over to Auburn, was pretty good. I think his first year.
He was good his second to last year at Auburn. Yeah. He was terrible his final year.
Yeah, he was not good. I think there were some issues, as there tends to be in that program every once in a while. But, I mean, that is a small sample size. Like, I mean, I think we all thought this guy had the arm talent. So, I mean, maybe there is some, maybe there is some truth to that they like Stidham. And just also, like, I mean, I'm probably going to talk about this a lot. As good as Joe Burrow looked this past year, it's a small sample size, right? Sure. And it's going to be different when he goes to Cincinnati, if that ends up being his final resting spot. So, just, I mean, it makes it interesting to predict, right? Because we see so little of these guys, right?
Yeah. Now, I did mention Jarrett Stidham and Michael Lombardi saying there's a chance. I don't think I agree with you that that's probably not going to happen, because he literally got benched in a game where they were trying to ice it against the Jets because he threw a pick six. They then signed Cody Kessler. So, like, the actions of the front office say they don't trust him as much as the hype may be saying as of right now. So let's continue this discussion here about Tom Brady and his current and former team, because FanDuel Sportsbook has some props posted for Brady's first year at the Bucs, and you can bet his yardage total, touchdown total, interception props, and I looked at J.J. Zacharyason's projections. We've had him on the show. He's been killing player projections and player props, and if you look at his projections for Brady on the Bucs, the under on Brady's interceptions is the best bet, I think, by a pretty wide margin. And there's also some value in the over on the yardage. But FanDuel Sportsbook is also offering which team will win more games this year between the Bucs and the Patriots. And I agree with you and Kevin, where the Patriots are interesting, but I'm getting the Bucs at plus 130 to win more games here than the Patriots. And I like that number quite a lot, because the Brady aspect of this discussion is interesting, because I agree with your assessment. I thought he looked fine last year. There was just a clear lack of talent around him, whether it be the wide receivers. Isaiah Wynn missed a lot of the year. David Andrews, their center, missed the entire year. And now he gets to throw the ball to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. That helps quite a bit. And this defense is pretty good too. We've alluded to this. Kevin alluded to this, where I think the perception broadly is that their defense is terrible. And it was 2 years ago. But it wasn't last year. They actually ranked 4th in numberFire's schedule-adjusted metrics overall. They were 7th against the pass. They were elite against the rush. And the two big catalysts of that pass defense, Mark, were their pass rushers, Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul. Now, coverage is more important than pass rush, but as both you and Kevin mentioned, pass rush is stickier. So I think we could see the Bucs regress, but I don't think they go back to being the defense they were in 2018. And then there's also this ambiguity around the Patriots at quarterback. It could be Jameis Winston. I think that'd be really fun to watch. It'd probably end terrible, but it'd be fun. It'd be great to watch him interact with Bill Belichick. I want it. Let me have it. It could be Dalton. Could be Cam. But it could also be Jarrett Stidham. If they do start Stidham, I think the Bucs win this one pretty easily. And with how much Brady struggled with those skill guys last year and how little the Patriots have done to address the skill guys so far in this offseason, there's still a lot of time. But I wouldn't expect anybody to make this offense a top-level offense for next year. So the only big edge the Pats have over the Bucs for next year is defense. And the Bucs are, I would say, underrated there. So I don't think this number will be at 130 or plus 130 for long, so I'd hop on while you still can. I agree with you that it's smart to buy low on the Patriots, but I think this Bucs team is really interesting. Their Super Bowl odds have come down way too much for me to buy into that one. Right. Looking at their win total right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, it's 8.5. That's fine. It's minus 142 on the over. That's more okay than their Super Bowl odds. But I think when I can get them at plus 130 versus the Patriots, I'll take it.
Yeah. And don't forget, Tampa Bay's defense was one of the most injured 2 years ago.
That's correct.
Huge amount of injuries on that side of the ball. So you expected some improvement, not as much as necessarily we saw in the numbers. But, definitely some promise. Yeah,
and they added Shaq Barrett between 2018 and 2019 too, and he was tremendous. So reasons to be optimistic there, but I think both teams will be discussing plenty as the offseason progresses. Now, let's do Quarantine Corner. That's what I'm going to call this here. Just decided that on the fly.
Love it.
I want to get your thoughts on things you've been doing while you've been self-isolating to give people ideas? Because I know it's tough to like think of what to do while you're quarantined. So what have you been doing to pass the time while you're trying to self-isolate and prevent the further spread of COVID-19?
I mean, it's not too much different what I normally do, but I mean, I find a lot of solace in books. We had a trip planned to Portugal at the end of the month for the kids' spring break, and so I picked up Night Train to Lisbon, which is just this beautiful, beautiful read. So it's this kind of this nerdy classics professor in Germany that all of a sudden realizes his life sucks and picks up this book from this Portuguese doctor who's kind of mysterious and writes these beautiful words, and he gets intrigued and takes the Night Train to Lisbon to learn about this guy. And really it's a story about finding yourself through the words and the stories of others. Just finished it. It's a great read. You know, if you're 43 years old and trying to find yourself and wondering about figuring out what the meaning of life is and where your role is in the world, it's a book that will definitely make you think about that at least a little bit and think about your own life. So that is it's Night Train to Lisbon by Pascal Mercier.
Okay, perfect. Mine is less academic.
The book's not academic at all, man.
No, I know, but it's not reading, basically. I've talked about this before on the podcast. I spend way too much time playing this game called 2048, where...
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember this? About that. It was a fad like 6 years ago.
Okay.
Basically what you do is like you have these blocks, and it's actually quite relevant when we're talking about exponential growth with regards to like the spread of viruses. But you have blocks, and every time you move the arrow keys, another block comes into the fold. But if you get a 2 block next to a 2 block, they combine for a 4 block, and you combine similar numbered blocks together, and then they double. So you put 2 4 blocks together, you get an 8, 2 8 blocks, you get a 16, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So exponential growth, it actually is pretty pertinent for this type of thing. Yeah. And the goal is to get a 2048 block. And set a new personal high last night. Not here to brag, but I tweeted about that, and I was so happy about this because like I have nothing else going on, honestly, and I was playing it a lot, and I was excited about this. Maybe 15 seconds later, after I post that tweet, my sister direct messages me on Twitter, and she's like, "What's your high score?" And I'm like, "You nerd! This is like it was 16 seconds after I posted this. She messages me because she said that she hadn't played it in a while, and wanted to make sure my high score was not higher than hers because like we've done like escape the room type things over like Christmas time and stuff. She is the most competitive person I've ever been around in my entire life. She won an adult spelling bee like a couple weeks ago. I should not be surprised that she direct messaged me this quickly, but I was. So it makes you competitive. It has numbers involved. You can do it while watching Netflix. I've been watching Ozark, I guess. I don't know. But like, I would say 2048, if you are okay with, like, if you don't have an addictive, personality, if you have an addictive personality, I would avoid it because it's very addicting. But as long as you're okay with that, it's pretty good. You should avoid
most of our modern world if you have an addictive personality.
I feel my like Twitter habits would agree with you. Like, it's not good. So
yeah, I'm taking a break from my Twitter timeline.
I don't blame you, man. It's bad.
So it's just like,
it's a lot of bad attempts at content by like sites, and I say this knowing full well that I'm contributing to bad content, so like I get it. But like bad attempts at content, it's a lot of people minimizing things they shouldn't be minimizing, and it's very frustrating. But there's also like periodic entertainment and football news, and I can't quit it because of that.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, it's not like I'm quitting Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm just quitting the timemeline. Because whenever I go on the timeline, you kind of get sucked in, and then you're wasting time, and I basically don't have any time to waste right now. And then you get like sucked into the trending topics, and so those are the things I'm trying to cut out.
Okay, that makes sense. I can buy into that. I can buy into anything, honestly, with cutting down Twitter usage, knowing full well that I should be doing it myself. But I think that that does make a lot of sense. We'll bring back Quarantine Corner next week too. To give you good. More ways to fill the time.
I got a bunch of other very large books that will help people.
Okay, good. Night Train to Lisbon.
I actually tweeted about them if you want to see them.
You have a list?
I'm still using Twitter. Yeah, I put out a thread.
Okay.
This afternoon, but we can talk about them on the show.
And I would read them, but I am too busy playing 2048. So
well,
that's where I'm at. It's going to last another week before I get incredibly bored and move on to something else. That is all that we have for today here on Covering the Spread. Once again, a big thank you to Kevin Cole of Pro Football Focus for swinging by and breaking down the fallout of free agency. Follow him on Twitter at Kevin Cole PFF. He is a data scientist over at Pro Football Focus. Ed, what is going on for you? I know March Madness has kind of interrupted plans, but what's going on for you over at the Power Rank?
Well, so I wanted to just plug my newsletter real quick, my email newsletter, because it is the one newsletter in the entire world which will not send out an email about coronavirus. I am not sending out an email to my list about how I'm dealing with coronavirus, because even if that were interesting, no one would care. So, and when sports comes back, there will be a lot of content about NFL, college football, and just about everything else. So, thepowerrank.com, as usual.
All right, thepowerrank.com to find that, and make sure you check out Ed's podcast too, the Football Analytics Show. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. I've been doing some evergreen daily fantasy content over on our other podcasts, so the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. You can find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. I had been meaning to do that for a long time. I guess I have time to do so now. So I've been doing that and find those over on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Big thank you to our producer, Calvin Theobald, from the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Again, back next week to talk with John Sheeran about some horse racing. For those of you who are not familiar, like me, hopefully you can learn a lot from John of FanDuel Sportsbook. We'll talk to you then. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.